on earth. This was where the most recalcitrant prisoners were housed in what the French called isolement, isolation. The minimum sentence to one of St. Joseph's 9-foot by 5-foot cells was 6 months, the maximum usually 5 years, though many prisoners had paid repeated visits. Time served on St. Joseph's was always added to an inmate's already existing sentence. Insanity wasn't uncommon among the survivors of such deprivation. Death was the more likely outcome. Silence was strictly enforced, and the tops of the cells were iron bars open to the elements, so that the tropical rains and burning sun were additional torments for the men. Guards walked on catwalks above the cells, making sure none of the prisoners spoke. The minuscule food ration was passed through a slot at the bottom of each cell's iron door, and another Judas door higher up could be opened so a prisoner could stick his head out of his cell if the warden or some other official wanted to speak to him. Once on St. Joseph's, there was no medical care, no dental care, zero hygiene. The prisoners lived like penned animals, but with the torturous self-awareness a poor animal never knows. The prisons on French Guiana were supposed to be a social experiment to reform prisoners so they could return to proper society. Instead, they had created a place more barbaric than any medieval dungeon. The commandos now came to a large clearing at the end of the path. The jungle had been hacked back for a complex of plastered stone buildings. The structures were brutish in style, and even without knowing their function, they seemed shrouded in dark menace. A gate gave access to a broad courtyard. The lock was heavy-duty, and the one commando tasked with picking it had to use his largest set of tools. He opened it a fraction of an inch at a time to prevent the rust-ravaged hinges from squealing. The lockpicker placed 2 wooden shims at the base of the heavy door so that it couldn't swing open farther or slam shut. The courtyard was plain dirt that had been raked smooth. Ahead was an administration building and housing for the guards. To their left stood the detention block. The team leader pointed out that a metal roof had been built above the catwalks to shield the guards, a detail that differed from their mission briefing. They waited in the shadows for a guard shift change to occur, which it did at precisely the top of the hour. A guard made his way from the dormitory and climbed up onto the parapet above the cells. He and the on-duty guard spoke for just a minute, and then the latter made his way off to his soft bed. The commandos gave it 10 minutes for the new guard to fall into routine. He was soon leaning against one of the roof's support columns, the cherry glow of his cigarette moving from his face as he inhaled to down by his waist when he relaxed his arm. There was just enough light to see the outline of a rifle slung over his shoulder. The iron stairs up to the guard's walkway were bolted to the side of the building. The lead commando unsheathed his knife and moved as slowly as a stalking cat up the stairs, his footfalls feathery light, his concentration total. He paused when only his eyes were above the top step, and he watched the Frenchman finish his cigarette and pitch the butt off the building so that it hit the courtyard in a shower of sparks. He started ambling down the length of the cell block, his footfalls slow and lazy. It had to be a miserable duty, the team leader thought as he rose from a crouch and padded after the guard. To his right and left were the iron bar tops of the open cells. No light penetrated their musty gloom. The guard was so dulled by routine that he never felt the shadow stalking him, and only reacted when a hand clamped over his mouth in a steel-like grip. He had a fraction of a second to stiffen in shock before the shiv was drawn from ear to ear, and his throat opened in a violent gush of blood. The soldier slowly lowered the guard to the floor as his body's functions shut down one by one, until his eyelids gave one last flutter, and his heart stopped. He slunk back down the stairs and regrouped with his men. They had 50 minutes to spring their target and get clear of the Salvation Islands before the corpse was discovered and an alarm sounded. They rightly assumed that guards on all 3 islands would be alerted of the murder by a klaxon or bell, and that they would pour from their